When you're young, silence can feel like peace. You tell yourself, I won't say it. It's not worth it. You swallow a thought, a feeling, a disappointment, and you think you're saving the day. But I want to tell you what I learned after decades. There is a silence that heals, and there is a silence that kills. They look the same from the outside, but they are not the same inside. The silence that heals is when you stop talking because you're choosing kindness. You're letting a moment pass so you don't wound someone you love. The silence that kills is when you stop talking because you've given up on being understood. That silence ends marriages while both people are still sitting at the same table. I got married to Margaret in my early 20s. We didn't have much money, but I remember those early years with tenderness because we were still trying. We would talk in bed, not for hours, but in those small, ordinary ways that make a marriage feel alive. A marriage isn't kept alive by grand romance. It's kept alive by the steady exchange of inner life. Then life began to speed up. Work got heavier. We had children. Bills arrived like clockwork. And somewhere in those years, something changed in the way we went quiet. Margaret would say, "You've been so tired lately. Are you all right?" And I'd answer, "I'm fine." Not because I was fine, but because I didn't want to burden her. Then she would say, "I feel like we haven't been close." And I'd say, "We're just busy." Her eyes would linger on me, waiting for something deeper, something more honest, and I wouldn't give it. Not because I didn't love her, because I didn't understand what I was withholding. One night we had an argument about something small. Instead of talking, I shut down. I sat in my chair, stared at the newspaper, and acted like I didn't hear her breathing behind me. Margaret said quietly, "Walter, please don't do that. It feels like you're leaving me." I didn't respond. I thought I was being calm. What I was really doing was punishing her with the cold, empty punishment of being shut out. That was the first time she named it, and the first time I ignored it. The truth is that silence is seductive. It gives you a sense of control. But the other person doesn't feel peace. They feel alone. And loneliness inside a marriage is one of the most painful kinds there is. Over the years, Margaret started to change. At first, she would try to pull me back. "Come sit with me. Tell me about your day." She'd reach for my hand, and I would respond, but not fully. Eventually, she stopped asking. When a spouse stops complaining, people think it's a good sign. But sometimes it means the person has stopped believing they can reach you. And when that happens, something essential dies. I remember a Sunday afternoon years later. Margaret was folding laundry. I was in the chair. We were both quiet. And I suddenly felt a strange fear, like I was sitting in a room with a stranger who knew all my habits. I didn't know what she was thinking anymore. Not because she was secretive, because she had stopped sharing. And I had trained her to stop. That's what that silence does. It teaches the other person that their inner life is not welcome, that their feelings are inconvenient. So they take those thoughts elsewhere. Sometimes they take them to someone who listens. Many affairs begin not with lust, but with a conversation that should have been happening at home. There was a man I worked with named Frank. He had been married for over 30 years. One day I asked him, "You all right?" He said, "We don't fight anymore." But the way he said it sounded like a funeral. His wife Elaine used to argue with him about everything. Then one day she stopped. She became polite. She still made dinner, still asked if he wanted tea, but she stopped trying to be close. Frank said, "It's like living with a roommate who knows my name." A year later, she left. She said, "I can't spend the rest of my life talking to a wall." When you are the silent one, you often feel like the victim. You feel misunderstood. So you go quiet to protect yourself. But your spouse experiences your silence as abandonment. And once a spouse stops needing you emotionally, the marriage is in real trouble. Margaret never left me. She stayed until the end. But there were years when we lived more like partners managing a household than lovers sharing a life. There was a distance in us that didn't need a suitcase to travel. Late in my marriage, Margaret had been feeling unwell. One evening she looked at me and said, "Walter, do you ever miss us?" That question landed in my chest like a stone. She wasn't asking if I missed our youth. She was asking if I missed the feeling of being close, the feeling of being known. I finally said, "Yes, I do." Then she said something that still makes my eyes sting. "I miss you too, and you're right here." That is what that kind of silence does. It makes someone miss you while you're still alive. After that conversation, I tried to change, but I also felt how much time I had wasted. Because love is not only what you feel, it is what the other person can reach. If your love cannot be reached, it becomes like food behind glass. If you are the one who goes quiet, hear this from an old man who learned too late. Your silence is not neutral. It is not harmless. Silence is a message, and the message your spouse hears is, "You don't matter enough for me to try." This kind of silence can exist in good marriages, marriages with no addiction, no infidelity, no abuse. It hides under the appearance of stability. You can go years thinking, "We're fine." Then one day your spouse says, "I don't feel anything anymore." But it didn't come from nowhere. It came from thousands of small moments where something needed to be said, and it wasn't. When Margaret passed away, I sat alone in our house. And I realized something that still hurts to say. The greatest tragedy is not divorce. The greatest tragedy is staying married for decades and never truly meeting each other. There is a difference between quietness and emotional absence. There is a difference between being calm and being unreachable. If you keep using silence as your main tool, it will eventually become your marriage's main language. And once silence becomes the main language, love begins to starve. The most important thing I can tell you is this: repair matters more than being right. Real repair. The kind where you turn toward your spouse and say, "I know I hurt you, help me understand." When you refuse to speak, your spouse does not stop needing connection. They simply stop coming to you for it. And when that happens, you lose the feeling of being each other's safe place. If you are married and you still have time, please understand what I'm saying. Speak. Tell them what you're afraid of. Tell them what you miss. Tell them what you need. One honest sentence can reopen a door that has been closed for years. The silence that kills a marriage is not the silence after a fight. It is the silence where love is present but unreachable. It is the silence where you stop trying to be known and your spouse stops trying to know you. If you can change that even a little, you may save something more valuable than you realize. You may save the feeling of coming home to someone who still feels like home.